Keir Starmer. He's been doing his, 587th reset of his premiership with a New Year address to activists. He's in Berkshire. The live stream of his address, Labour Party members, was cut off within seconds. Usual chaos with Labour. And basically, we found out what he's saying. Basically, he says that 2026 is a year that we're going to be turning a corner where, when we say we want national renewal of the country, and we do, it becomes a reality, and people begin to feel the difference in their pockets and the ability to pay the bills. Well, let's talk about this and talk of a Brexit betrayal with my next guest, former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards. Good morning and Happy New Year to you, Paul.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with what Keir Starmer had to say today, because this reset is all about, apparently, it's about the cost of living, because everyone knows we're in a cost of living crisis still. Yeah, energy bills have come down, mortgage interest rates coming down, but people are still seeing, basically their pay packets are not going as far as they used to go. He's basically saying, wages are going up, although it's largely more in the public sector than in the private sector, and people will be seeing, things getting better over this year. Is that just pie in the sky nonsense?
I don't think it's nonsense. I think some people are starting to see some increases from very long decades of flatlining wages. I mean, the cost of living is obviously a massive issue, which is absolutely right that he should be talking about it amidst all of the big international stories. We do still have to focus on the bread and butter. I was knocking on doors in Eastbourne yesterday, and, Venezuela came up exactly zero number of times. Fly tipping came up quite a lot. Potholes came up.
Bins, bins. You know me, I've got an obsession with the bin collections.
Absolutely, it did come up actually, and so people are concerned, especially now post Christmas, with the bills, which is why he's talking about it. It's a shame that the live feed has gone down, of course, because we don't know what he's actually saying. I think a man with a tweed jacket and a cigarette was seen running from the scene with a pair of pliers.
No! I honestly, I don't think Nigel Farage ever has to worry about Keir Starmer speaking. Every time Keir Starmer speaks, I think he just boosts reform in the polls. I was watching, come back from the Holes. Okay, I've got jet lag as an excuse, 7-hour time difference, but still, from where I've been, it took me 3 sittings to get through that Keir Starmer interview, Laura Kunsberg, because I kept dozing off because it's just so boring, and he's so unbelievably unconvincing on every topic. And this is the issue, isn't it? The public don't like him, they don't trust him, they want him gone, but they're just not really sure, same as a lot of Labour backbenchers, of who they get in return, because realistically it looks like Ed Miliband would be the alternative.
Well, that's exactly the point, isn't it? You have to be very careful what you wish for. And what the Tories taught us over all those years was that if you swap your leader and hope that suddenly everything's going to dramatically change and people will feel a difference, it doesn't work, and you don't necessarily get the candidate you wanted in the first place. I mean, for the Labour Party, of course, it's very hard to do this. The Tories could do it with great alacrity and regularity, but Labour has a constitution built in against this idea of swapping leaders all the time. So it's a hard thing to do. But Starmer's point is, I think, a good one, which is that you need a grown-up in charge. He may not be the man that we would want to celebrate New Year's Eve with and pop champagne and go dancing with, but on the other hand, and he also, I know it drives people up the pole too when he's sort of slow and deliberative and lawyerly and weighs up evidence, but I think in this mad world we need people like that do just look at what's going on and not just tweet from the hip, but actually look and see what's going on. So when he gives his interviews and it sounds a bit on the one hand and a bit on the other, I kind of welcome that. I think someone weighing up evidence and listening to what's going on, dialing into other world leaders, taking his time in a fast-moving situation, probably the right approach, isn't it?
Except I think most people interpret it as I do, which is actually him sitting on the fence and dithering and not really knowing. I interpret it not as, he's a really thoughtful man. I interpret it as someone who's A, boring as hell, and B, someone who has no drive, no vision, no philosophy of life. That's how I interpret it.
Well, and yet he got selected to be a member of Parliament and then elected as a member of Parliament, and then he got himself elected as the leader of the Labour Party, and then he became Prime Minister.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people would argue that he told lies. He told lies for certainly the last two. He sold himself as a man of the left of the Labour Party in 2020. He sold himself as a man sort of more on the right, and would, these are things he was going to get done to the country at large last year or the year before last.
They're all liars, but he somehow has managed to use his political skills to get to where he's got, which is the top job in our system, which many others have wanted and very few have ever got. So he's obviously doing something right.
Well, you say he's doing something something right. He's not very good at... This is something he said, but he put this in a tweet. I think it's similar to the words he used to Laura Kunzberg yesterday. He said, we need to shoot down this idea that slogans, easy answers, quick fixes and shortcuts are what will fix this country. But actually, that's all he does, smash the gangs. Well, he hasn't smashed the gangs. We've seen boat migrant numbers going up by a huge percentage under Labour. He thought that you could just have a nice chat with Macron and with the Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels, and then you could sort the problem out. Oh, what a surprise. You couldn't. He thought that as soon as Labour were in power, the civil servants would start doing what they were sodding well told to do by the elected representatives of the people. Turns out they're not doing that either. He's backtracked on virtually every major policy, like whether it's welfare reform, whether it's on changes to, things like, who could be eligible for winter fuel allowance. He's partly backtracked on farmers' inheritance tax. I mean, the man hasn't got a moral fibre in his body.
Well, doesn't that make the point, though, that you can't just come in with slogans and say things and things happen overnight?
But that's exactly what he did.
So, for example, the trade deals, which he's citing today, he's talking about the world-class deals we've got with India, Europe, and the States. Now, those are slow burn things that will pay off over the rest of this Parliament, and people will see the benefits from. It's not a slogan. It's actually a hard negotiation that has led to boosts for British companies and jobs. But it won't happen tomorrow. It will happen over time. And the same with the policies like investing in the housing or the rail fares or whatever it is. These are things that we'll notice, but over time, because in real politics you can't do stuff overnight. And if you could, we would all be doing it, wouldn't we? If we could fix problems overnight, we would do it. So it is about hard yards.
But again, he's concerned about rail prices as he puts up a cost for people driving. I mean, most people don't get a train from one year to the next. This is so much a North London, middle-class man worrying about his concerns. I'm surprised he's not said we'll have a deduction on villas in Tuscany.
I think freezing the rail fares
for everyone.
Freezing, nothing wrong with that. Do you know what I got for Christmas, by the way, Julia? From my kids was a tub of hummus.
You're kidding
me. So there you go.
Wow.
Talk about the cost of living crisis.
Wow, that is absolutely. But it was fancy hummus, though.
It was reasonably fancy. But anyway, for freezing the rail fares, a lot of people do commute on the train.
Most people don't. Most people don't get a train from one year to the next.
But if you have to do good, you do it by inches, don't you? And so this is another step forward that will help people. Okay. And
Right. Well, talking of helping people, will it help Keir Starmer if he does actually go ahead with what many fear will be a Brexit betrayal, basically taking us much, much closer to realignment with the single market, pretty much back in a customs duty? He may not say he's doing it, but let's face it, all of the realignment, he's realigning, whether it's on agriculture, whether it's on food, on this rule and that rule, whether it's on energy, whether it's on net zero, basically gradually, sneakily taking us back into the European orbit. And we know what's going to come next. Well, we may as well just rejoin, shouldn't we?
Well, I think in this divided world where the rules order seems to be broken up and God knows what's happening with Taiwan and Colombia and God knows where else, I think closer cooperation with the EU is a good idea for the UK. Now, that's not the same as rejoining the EU or going full feet into the customs union, but I think just having greater trade, more alignment, getting our lawyers and architects being able to work in Europe, the Erasmus scheme, which means kids can go and study abroad. These things are just sensible for us so that we're not isolated. We're not alone.
We're not isolated. We had a scheme that replaced the Erasmus scheme, and British kids were able to go and study around the world rather than Europe. More of them wanted to study outside Europe than inside Europe. What does that tell you?
I think the Erasmus scheme is, I can't think anyone that's opposed to that idea. It's a perfectly sensible bit of
I'm absolutely opposed to subsidising middle-class kids getting a gap year.
Well, I don't think that's what it is. It's about...
I think that is what it is. I know people who've done it and they've done absolutely sod all work and we pay for it.
Well, it should be better held to account then, shouldn't it? But the idea of young people studying abroad is a good thing.
I see kids coming from Europe as well. And this is the thing. What's wrong
with that? You'd have to be pretty ideologically opposed to anything European to stop kids studying. No,
absolutely. I don't know why it needs to be subsidised by. And we know that the cost will end up being in the billions because we're on a starter cost. You know as well as I do, the EU are taking the mick out of us. They're charging us a fortune for anything to have more more involvement because they know Keir Starmer is literally dribbling on his knees, desperate to get back in. And what's going to happen is eventually there'll be pressure from the Greens, the Lib Dems, and from Labour, and let's face it, large sections of the Conservative Party as well, say we may as well rejoin. Now, do you think that we ever would rejoin, and could we do it without the mandate of an elected government saying in the manifesto we're going to have a vote and then actually another referendum?
Well, that to me is the only way it could happen is constitutionally. I don't see how you could do it in any other way. So if I mean, it's a real hypothetical. It's going to send everyone absolutely nuts, isn't it? But the idea that we rejoin the European Union could only happen, in my view, from a government, as you say, elected on a manifesto pledge to do so, and then a referendum of the people with a 1% victory in that.
Although 50.01% would be enough, wouldn't it, for the Remainers? Do you think
that's how it works? But it's not happening, is it? It's not happening.
I don't think it is happening. Do you think? Because I don't think any of that is going to happen. But do you think that the British people? We're told, all the polls are saying that British people would rather we hadn't left, would vote to rejoin. I don't believe for a nanosecond the deal that we'd get, including having to take on the euro, we'd have to lose the pound. It would be an absolute requirement. We'd have to join the euro. Do you think in a month or Sundays the British people would vote for that?
Well, no, and that's why the argument about having closer alignment with the trading bloc that is the EU is the right one, because that just benefits British people without some of the things that they rejected at the referendum last time around. But to ignore Europe completely, and do ourselves is stupid.
All right, Paul, we'll have to leave it there. No one's talking about ignoring Europe. I'm just saying let's not align with everything they do because it's a fading economy. Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor, thank you very much, Steve, for that quick response from Sam Armstrong.
I think before we get all of our guests on air, we should ask them first, when was the last time you ate a tub of hummus?
No, fancy hummus.
Fancy hummus.
I've never been a big fan of hummus.
It's a good test, actually.
I love that. That is, as Christmas presents go, to be fair, I don't think... Did I even get a present from my kid at Christmas? I'm not sure I did. But the question I'm putting to our audience, was Donald Trump right or wrong to launch that military raid to arrest the leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife?
Yes. I woke up. It was an early morning for me, not because of the news. I just slept early. I woke up early at 6 a.m. local time, and my phone was ringing like crazy. Everybody telling me the news. And I'm like, what is going on? Somebody died? What did I do? I don't know what's happening. And then I learned about the news of Maduro being captured, and it's like a dream for me as a Venezuelan. And I think that that's the same reaction for millions of people. People are dancing in the streets all over the world, celebrating. So how can somebody in a different country tell us, oh no, this is so wrong? Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker. Countries conduct police operations abroad all the time.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the contrast between, particularly on the left around the world, saying how terrible and outrageous this is, and the actual Venezuelan people, who, as we know, 80% of Venezuelans voted for the opposition last time round. And we know that 8 million of a very small country had left, like you, to seek a better life abroad. I'd like to go back a little bit and get a little bit of background from you. I mean, you go around, you give talks at universities and everywhere. You're an economist by trade, basically explaining to people about, why we should learn the lessons of Venezuela. I mean, Maduro's learning the lessons and will in a court later today in Manhattan. But why the world, America and Britain included, need to learn the lessons of Venezuela. Tell us what happened under, first Chavez and then Maduro, and why you chose to leave.
Yes, so what's important about Venezuela is that unlike every other socialist country, it became socialist democratically. You see, the Eastern Europe didn't become socialist because the Eastern Europeans voted for it. The Russians didn't vote for Lenin either in 1917. The Chinese didn't elect Mao. The Cubans didn't elect Castro. Yeah. But the Venezuelans elected Hugo Chavez. And that original sin of voting for him then became a forced regime, right? They began cheating on the elections after their socialist policies became unpopular, but they got in democratically. And it matters because that's what could happen to us in the rest of the democratic world. That's what could happen to the United Kingdom. I mean, it's slowly happening with the rise of government, after the end of the Thatcher years. I'm a big admirer of Margaret Thatcher since I was a very young kid, because she stood for free enterprise, and free enterprise is what brings prosperity to a people. In Venezuela, I had to line up for my own food. I had to, have no power for hours. I had to bring water in buckets up to my apartment. And we didn't used to live that way,
Well,
which is what
that's
matters.
the thing. Let's go back to before Chavez and Maduro. And people often talk about Maduro as if he's very different from what Chavez did. He's not. I mean, he's just carrying on, just a worse version of what was already bad. But the Venezuelan people, I mean, they were living in one of the richest economies in the world, these vast oil supplies. Everything was going absolutely brilliantly. Why did they then vote for socialism? I mean, because normally we see that, as you say, it's something that's imposed or something that desperate people who are living in poverty might choose.
So, well, there's two factors. One is a short-term one. Venezuela had a banking crisis in the late 90s. There was a recession. There were corruption scandals of the previous government. And Chavez was just a very charismatic politician that capitalized on that, deceived people, they voted for him, and that's how he got elected. But Venezuela had nationalized the oil industry in the 70s. And since he nationalized the oil industry, production stagnated. They tried to backtrack and bring back the private sector in the 90s, but it was too late. The recession happened and Chavez got elected. But you are right. Even then, even though Venezuela was undergoing some issues, it was still the richest country in Latin America. Yeah. It did not have this massive inequality that people claim was the reason they got elected. It was actually less unequal than most other Latin American countries. So these are all excuses. People just got lied to, and that's very easy with charismatic people.
Yeah, indeed. And Maduro, when Chavez died, Maduro took over and he basically made things even worse, because we're not just talking about the incompetence of socialism and these vast oil supplies, which, because the government was now running the extraction process, were basically, wasn't there a point where basically it would cost them 10 times as much to get a barrel of oil out of the ground as any other country? So they lost money on oil production.
And the thing, Julia, is that if socialism was going to work somewhere, it would be in the country that has the largest oil reserves in the world, with free money coming from the ground. And it didn't. It was still not enough money.
Yeah, very fair point. But then we added to that, we saw for the Venezuelans sort of vast corruption, which always goes hand in hand with socialism, interestingly, because of the incompetence, but vast corruption and also drug running. These are the look. We know this is what Donald Trump is indicting him on. Narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine trafficking. How involved was Maduro and his wife, as far as you're aware, and his government with the drug trafficking?
They are a cartel because after they destroyed the oil industry, they couldn't profit anymore from the oil, right? The oil was government run, the government destroyed it. But you know what was not government run? Drug trafficking. That is certainly privately run and everything, very capitalist in a way. And they were capitalists in their personal level, even though they wanted socialism for the rest of us.
Funny that, yeah.
And so that's how they made money. They paid off their interest. Look, it goes so deep that Maduro's own nephews, the biological nephews of Celia, the wife, were arrested and indicted and then convicted of drug trafficking to the United States. The problem was that Joe Biden, the previous president, he gave them a pardon and sent them back to Venezuela. A big mistake.
Why?
Well, he wanted to exchange them for some American prisoners in Venezuela. Okay. And then Maduro ended up kidnapping more Americans.
Yeah, well, we've heard so much more about what's gone on with Colombia as well. And Donald Trump has said that Colombia's next on the list. We'll come on to Greenland in a moment. But I mean, has Venezuela been flooding America with drugs? How big an issue is it?
So it's been mainly cocaine, but the issue is that a lot of people say, well, it's all the Mexican cartels. But where do you think the Mexican cartels get their cocaine from? It's produced in Colombia, and then it's transported through Venezuela with Venezuelan state-owned resources. Boats, little airplanes that fly all over to Central America. I mean, there's been many analyses and studies of this that prove it. The Center for Strategic and International Studies has a really great map of this. That is how most of the cocaine gets to Europe too, by the way, not just the United States. Spain, the corruption schemes that are happening with Venezuela, and that now we will begin to uncover. Because remember, Maduro is going to give information now to the U.S. government. And a lot of people abroad, I think, should be very scared because we're going to know everything they did.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because there was a lot of talk on Saturday when we found out that he had been seized in that Truth Social post from Donald Trump saying he'd been captured. Extraordinary revelation. But actually, this was all a bit of a farce because actually he'd done a deal to get out of the country, and he would have been offered the usual. You can keep a certain number of billions, and you go off at your Caribbean island or head to Moscow, as they often end up doing, and you'll be fine. But it doesn't sound like a deal has been done. But would you expect that one will now be done if he's facing the rest of his life behind bars?
Well, I think the main priority of the administration first is freedom for Venezuela and prosperity, right? Yeah. Especially for the oil industry. You cannot have oil companies invest in Venezuela because they simply won't unless there's stability and a democratic government that guarantees that after Trump leaves office, they're not just going to take all their property again. Right? So this is why I think they're threatening Delcy Rodriguez so much. And I think that's a good thing.
She's Maduro's vice president.
Yes. And by the way, she has a long history of violence and Marxism. Her father was a Marxist guerrilla terrorist who got killed in the 70s after he kidnapped an American CEO for 3 years.
Wow.
I mean, this woman was raised by another psychopath.
Right. So this thing, a lot of people are very concerned about, why did Donald Trump leave the Maduro, and his acolytes in power with the support of the military? Why did he not say, we're handing over power to the party that did actually win the last elections, to the opposition?
Yeah, I think the answer is pretty simple. Number one, this operation was very difficult. Imagine having done it to capture about 5 more people. Americans would have died. Almost certainly in that complex of an operation. Number two, this already gives them the signal, and they already were threatened, and they can do it again one by one. And now they have the chance to do an orderly transition. The military does not support the population, Julia. Yeah. This is important that people understand. The military are the drug dealers. This is not like other Latin American countries where you have the military that are, they're just standing by and judging who they're going to support. No, the soldiers, the low-level soldiers that escaped, they're not defending Maduro. Mm-hmm. Only the Cubans were. The people who ended up getting killed in the raid, 32 were Cubans. The Cuban government already announced. So. But all the generals, all the lieutenants, all of them are drug traffickers. And I think Trump prefers an orderly and stable transition.
Yeah. And we've certainly seen America and the West generally don't have a very strong track record when it comes to this idea of nation building after they've toppled leaders. What do you think happens next? And what are the people back home? I know you've still got your family back in Venezuela, I assume. And what do they want to happen next? Because we've seen, there've been some sort of protests and counter-protests, some people dancing on the streets, but there will be people who've been on the Maduro payroll for a very long time who don't want things to change. Well,
this is important for, I think, every viewer to understand. The overwhelming majority of Venezuelans want the regime out. They're scared of protesting in Venezuela because the armed groups are still around. They're actually crossing all over the streets, Maduro's armed groups, threatening people so that everybody stays home. So what people want is freedom. They want Venezuela to be what it used to be. Julia, my own grandparents immigrated to Venezuela in the 1950s from Italy and Spain because they were poorer in Italy and Spain than in Venezuela. And they found freedom, they have found prosperity. We lived a normal life with a car, with a home, going to school, having food, and then no electricity, and then no water. People just want to go back to what it can be. And that's not just good for us. We would stop exporting drugs and illegal immigrants and start welcoming immigrants and exporting oil. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing for the world?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? What do you make of all the critics in America, in Europe, and others? We've got Labour MPs and senior figures here in the UK saying, look, this is against the rules-based international order. It's a breach of international law, and this sets a precedent for any dictator, anyone in the world. They can just go and do what they want. You're laughing. What's your response?
Well, because I gotta be very honest. I do not care about the rules. I care about what's just and what's right. And President Trump did what's right for the Venezuelan people, for the American people, and honestly for the world. And if you're against that because of some precedent, do you think Putin cares about precedents?
Exactly.
He's out there poisoning his opponents. He's interfering in other elections. He's not going to stop doing that because of what we do or not do. If anything, this sends them a signal that you're on notice. This is what we can do, and do not mess with the free world.
Well, there's a lot of people saying, again, precedents being open. Colombia may be next, Denmark next. There have been some threats, even, Iran. We've had 9 days of protests against the Iranian regime and very clear signals from the American government saying, look, don't start shooting protesters because we will be taking action. Now, we've already seen some people shot in Iran. Yes. Do you think this is America reasserting itself as the world's policeman? In which case, is that a good thing?
Well, it is reasserting itself as in it's going to use its power to advance its interests abroad, not some abstract notions. And by the way, I'm fully endorsing what Trump is threatening to Colombia. The Colombian government is totally in cahoots with Maduro, and Petro is very fearful of what will be revealed in Venezuela because his campaign, the reason he's president of Colombia is the Venezuelan regime. And there's a long history that I think people should research there. So I think that Marco Rubio understands that they really care especially about the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. That's the thing. This is, the American sphere of influence, isn't it? There is this argument that, that people can talk about this international rules-based order, but it's all just a mirage. And actually, it's all about power. Yeah. It's all about what your willingness and your ability to actually use that power. Donald Trump has made that clear. What do you think the future will be for Venezuela? And would you consider going back if it did once again, start booming?
I see two scenarios. One, a positive one, that is there's a transition in the next few months and then the country begins to be rebuilt. And if that happens, of course, I would love to go and help. And I'm very close to, the people who are trying to achieve that. But I do think there's still this scenario where the Trump administration may be deceived by the current regime, as in delaying the transition enough that Trump is out of office and then they stay in power and nothing changes. So that is my concern.
Very interesting. Really
thank fascinating. You for having me,
well,
Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate that. That is Daniel DiMartino. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, an exile from Venezuela. Sam Armstrong, listening to all of that. It is absolutely fascinating, again, how little the media in the West has covered, just the levels of degradation that the Venezuelan people have been pushed to, the fact that it is the biggest single refugee crisis in the world. We don't hear about this in the media. The fact that people resorted to having to, eat their own pets, scrabble for food on the street. Middle-class families living a normal life who had their homes, their farms, their shops seized by the authorities.
I'm sorry to say this as stridently as I do, but it doesn't matter because Maduro wasn't Jewish. That's the reality. That's the reality. The West has decided that there is only one group that is committing human rights abuses in their view, and that's the only Jewish country on earth. And we hear endlessly and just incessantly about the latest supposed outrage, most of which later turn out to be total and utter falsehoods, but it doesn't matter because it's spread halfway around the world before the truth has got its trousers on. And shame on the broadcast producers, shame on the newspapers, shame on everybody that ignores the plight of 8 million refugees from Venezuela and talks incessantly about one country just as part of their own flagrant brazen anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. Just to let you know, Nicolas Maduro has now set off from the detention facility in Brooklyn, I think, where he's being held, taking him to a court in Manhattan. He's due to make an appearance at the federal court in Manhattan, 5 o'clock UK time today. So I must ask you, first of all, about Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro appearing in court yesterday saying, I'm a prisoner of war. The Americans say, well, actually, you're a narco-terrorist and we've gone in and seized you because you're a fugitive from justice. Was Donald Trump right or wrong to do that?
I mean, he was wrong to do this, but let's be honest, none of us should be shedding a tear over Nicolas Maduro. He's a tyrant, he's a thug, he's broken far more laws than anyone else has. I won't be shedding all that many tears.
I don't understand this view. So it was wrong to do it, but it's the right thing. I don't understand. It's either right or wrong.
I don't think it works like that, though. There's a lot of dictators in the world, and we try and have some kind of system. You can't say that the law should apply to Maduro but not to Trump. If it was illegal to take him, then you have problems down the line.
No, because Donald Trump is a democratically elected leader, and
yes,
Maduro
but he was
isn't
democratically elected by the people of America, not the people of Venezuela.
Yeah.
America's jurisdiction doesn't extend globally.
Well, it does actually. They kind of decide that themselves.
Well, at that point, you've just given up and you've said might makes right. You know, he isn't elected by the people of Venezuela.
I haven't given up.
By the people of Europe.
I recognise the reality. Yes, might rules. End of. Full stop.
Well, Maduro had the right to rule Venezuela by that system. No, he did.
Well, until someone else came along who was stronger.
Yeah, but that seems to be the system that you're going for. And I'm
not going for it. I'm just recognising that is we don't have a rules-based international system because not everybody obeys all the rules, because the bad people don't obey them. So all the good people supposedly obeying them really just makes us look like fools, because this ain't going to stop China invading Taiwan. It didn't stop Putin invading Ukraine, and it won't stop any other of the mean, the bad dictators doing what they want to do. So if it's a good thing that he's no longer in power and he's going to be tried in court, he's not just being shot in the head, he's being tried in a court in America, then surely that's a good thing.
I mean, your logic there is the same logic that goes, because the police are rubbish at stopping people mugging phones, we should both go out after this and nick a few iPhones. This is the logic of the bottom. I mean, I go against this on pragmatic terms. Point to me where we've had the US remove a dictator and it's gone well for anyone in the last 30 years, 50 years, 80 years. I think World War II was maybe the last time it worked out.
That is a fair point, but that's a different argument.
Well, no, I will say we shouldn't do it because it doesn't work, because there's no plan. This looks as good as it will ever look today, and even 40% of Republicans don't like it today.
Okay,
this has no mandate,
Venezuelans seem pretty sodding happy about it.
Some Venezuelans are very happy.
Most Venezuelans are happy about it, by all accounts.
If you look at the street protests, there's huge pro-Maduro ones,
well,
because
of course,
they're always
because you're not going to be punished for doing that, are you? But you will be punished by the authorities in charge if you go against them. What do you make of Keir Starmer refusing to say whether the capture of Maduro broke international law or not? Yvette Cooper made a statement in the Commons. People are saying the Prime Minister should have made a statement, but the Foreign Secretary was there. But and she's gone perhaps as far as perhaps we would expect her to go in terms of, she said that the UK doesn't recognise the new Venezuelan government, but reality is, we didn't recognise the old one because we knew that he was not democratically elected. But should Keir Starmer sort of, if he is so obsessed as he claims with international law, should he say, I don't agree with this?
I think he's tied himself in a knot on this one, hasn't he? And I don't know why he's done it. I can completely see the logic of going, we need the US to be on board with Ukraine. We can't have them suddenly going, screw you all. So we're going to have to stay close, stay quiet, and suck it up. But if you're going to do that, and annoy lefties like me, if you're going to do that, why put in the statement that international law is really important? And they've done a classic Labour thing of we'll put in the statement that international law is really important, and then spend 3 days not answering whether or not we think this follows international law, even though everyone knows it doesn't. I mean, the US is barely trying to say it does. Why do that? They've done the classic situation of just locking themselves into a line that pleases no one.
They're kind of the view, I think, that it's not about an international law. It's about criminality, and that we are talking about a narco-terrorist who's in cahoots with, the axis of evil, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, drug running, helping to fund Hezbollah and terrorist attacks by Iran. I mean, what's not to like, and therefore that he's been caught banged to rights. I mean, on behalf of people who don't want to be blown up when they go to a concert or get on the tube, I'm all in favour.
I think when you start doing unsanctioned, unreasoned, without any sort of support, foreign ventures like this, you don't reduce the risk of terrorism, you dramatically increase
no. When you say support, basically, if this had been agreed to by the UN Security Council, including Russia and China as permanent members, then it would be legal and okay. That's what you're saying.
Come on.
That's what you're saying.
Let's be honest, the UN Security Council is a joke, but this isn't even legal under US domestic law. This is absolute nonsense. And so this is just Trump liking a foreign adventure and liking to look like the big man. I don't think we have to I don't get the people going 4D chess. He's sort of planned this as some major oil industry thing. As far as I can tell, the oil industry is going, oh, crap, we're going to have to go in this now. We don't want to go into Venezuela. This won't work. So I just think
I don't think that is what they're saying at all. They just want more assurances that their assets aren't going to be seized again.
Well, yes, and how does that assurance happen? Who defends it? Who backs it up?
I think the point is America is saying that they will defend it.
And what happens when Trump's presidency ends? Where's the track record of US investment in Venezuela?
That would be a criticism of any subsequent president for not doing that.
Well, I think that's why you make a plan before you suddenly invade and say you're running a country, isn't it?
What do you make of the threats to Greenland, of course, which is a territory of the Danes, who, of course, not just members of the EU, but also members of NATO, and that claim that, from the Danish Prime Minister, this would be the end of NATO if there were an invasion of Greenland.
I mean, it feels like a statement of fact, doesn't it? It's complete bonkers. It's complete insanity that the US wants Greenland. Again, it is people having to try and put on some form of sanity or reasoning for what looks like an increasingly deranged and dictatorial president. There is no reason for the US to seize Greenland for security reasons. There's a reason it's never been on the agenda till now, and watching people having to try and backwards justify it because they like Trump is bizarre. The mental gymnastics involved are quite elaborate.
Okay. I mean, I don't see any justification for them invading. Absolutely not. It would be unacceptable to me, a democratic state. However, there are massive strategic concerns about the inroads being made by China and Russia, again, not just in South and Central America and Africa, but also in Greenland as well.
I mean, you usually deal with that by strengthening your alliances and strengthening your relationships. Greenland's had a very long history of allowing US bases, allowing US espionage efforts. Yeah. There's an amazing effort. The US tried to stage its nukes there once on a weird underground train, and turned out that icebergs move, and they hadn't factored for that. Turns out that that's a bad idea with nukes. So Greenland has put up with quite a lot of US security madness in the past, would in the future. It's not going to get easier when you're constantly threatening them. I mean, if there's a risk, it's that.
All right. Let's also talk about the protesters we've had back here. We had them, in America. We had them in Venezuela on both sides. It is extraordinary how much you've seen the people who were, one minute it's all free Palestine, suddenly, swapping their flags for free Maduro flags, and basically anything that's sort of anti-Trump, anti-America, anti-imperialist. If Trump's against it, they're on the side of it. But I mean, does this tally, given the subjugation he's put and the degradation he's imposed on the Venezuelan people? In fact, he's a drug trafficker. I mean, cause of an awful lot of evil in our world.
It does feel a bit selective, as if human rights abuse has only become visible if Donald Trump or if the West is involved. The very little outrage over Sudan, very little outrage over, what's happened post-Afghan fallback, Iran. Yes, it's a horrible double standard. It makes no sense. And Maduro, again, I kind of could not care less about him. He's done far more abuse than will ever happen to him. As you say, in many ways, it's more than he deserves. It just doesn't make it a good idea.
Long term. Let's talk about something that is or is not a good idea. You and I disagree on this. Your political editor of the New World was called the New European. I mean, basically, as far as you guys are concerned, the font of all goodness and light in the world is the European Union. You love a Brussels bureaucrat more than life itself. There's no doubt at all that our Prime Minister is a massive Ramona. He was a shadow Brexit secretary, spent 3 years after the 2016 referendum, gave a clear statement of the view of the British people, trying to undermine that view. Apparently, we just didn't really know what we were voting for because we were all a bit thick and a bit bigoted. He tried to have a second referendum to undermine that one before it even been imparted. Well, now he's basically going to go for what's called dynamic alignment with EU rules when it comes to agri-food, energy, you name it, where we're basically going to follow all of the rules of the EU so we can keep up and keep alongside, handing over the powers of our own elected representatives in Parliament and our own government to make our own rules as suits us. Is this basically ending Brexit by the back door?
I mean, I really wish Starmer was this arch pro-Remainer that you guys sort of think he is.
You think he isn't?
He was for a while, but God, they've sort of endlessly committed to red lines that I think are counterproductive. I would like us back in Europe. I don't think it's on the table.
No, we're in Europe. We're in Europe. We're in the continent of Europe.
I would like us back in the EU bloc. I think we have lost power. We have lost influence. We have really, when we need a new security alliance, when we need new relationships, we are on the periphery when we need to be in the centre.
You think
and that is bad.
We're leading the way on most of the major issues.
We're not even in SAFE. We're not even in the EU procurement stuff for this. We are on the edge of the strategic alliances, despite being one of two nuclear powers in Europe.
If and when Putin decides to go for anywhere else in Europe, they'll all be looking to us. Don't you worry.
Oh, they really won't, because come on, we can barely manage to. We can't build a tank that works at the moment. You know, we are not at the cutting edge of security. We've neglected this a
We're
long
way
time.
ahead of most of the European countries.
That is true.
I find it I find it absolutely fascinating that you think that we're sort of so out in the cold. I mean, quite apart from the fact that we've got international trade deals with countries like India, we've got a better, well, if it ever actually happens, better tariff relationship with the US than the European Union managed. We kept being told all the power the European Union had, we'd have better deals with countries. Well, that's not been proven to be the case at all.
Well, where's these better deals post Brexit? You know, as you said, the key thing with the US one is where is it? The India deal seems to, I mean, it amounts to very, very little when you actually add up and look at it. Trade tends to be about who is near you. We are surrounded by EU nations. We don't have a neighbour that isn't in the EU, and most of this stuff is about goods. The dynamic alignment stuff that we were talking about, in practice, if you don't want checks on the border, you have to line up. The products have to match the standards of who you're selling them to. We have decided that's easier if we just have those standards. That's a choice we have made for
ourselves. If an American company or an Indian company or a Chinese company want to sell to the EU, they also have to do that. But that's up for that company to do that. It doesn't mean that our whole country has to align with EU rules because some companies are selling to the EU.
But they get checked as they go in, whereas we are much more integrated with them. We have traditionally sold a lot more to them, and this is essentially something we have decided will be a simpler way to be able to trade with them. And
you say the government has decided, but
yes.
But handing over our right to make our own laws about these things was something that British people decided in 2016.
Well, the difference is this isn't sort of in a treaty. This isn't bound forever. A new government can change it at any point that they want. And let's stress that with time limits, dynamic alignment was what Boris agreed in his Brexit deal and at each other stage.
For a short period.
Because it turns out that at each point you would end it, we will lose a lot of trade. We will have a new set of delays and issues at the border. And everyone's looked at it and gone, there is no benefit to not aligning.
Only because the EU creates that. Bearing in mind, the EU is where we got the horse meat in lasagnas from. So let's all stop pretending they make proper checks when they choose not to. Well, I mean, I'd best get your response first of all on Greenland, because that's a developing story. After the invasion with special forces troops on Saturday of Venezuela, and the seizure of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who appeared in court yesterday in New York on drugs and weapons trafficking charges, we've had those statements from Donald Trump saying, Greenland could be next. Really, we've had this joint statement from the French, German, Polish, Spanish, Italian, and British and Danish leaders meeting in Paris, a meeting of the coalition of the willing on Ukraine, and basically saying, look, Arctic security remains a key priority for Europe. They say it's critical for international transatlantic security. They say that upholding the principles of the UN Charter, including sovereignty, territorial integrity and the viability of borders is crucial. And basically they say that Greenland belongs to its people. They're basically wagging their fingers saying, don't mess with Greenland as part of Denmark. But can they back that up if Donald Trump does decide to go in?
Well, perhaps not, but it's a bit of an odd one, really, because there's a Second World War treaty that gives the United States the permission to base as many troops as they like in whatever format they like on Greenland. So, up until about 20 years ago, there was 300,000 US troops on Greenland, including a nuclear air base. In fact, there are certainly reports of a nuclear bomb that was lost over Greenland about 40 years ago and never found. So I don't know if it was found secretly and they've done away with it or whether it's still there somewhere under the ice. But anyway, so the United States has always had the right under that Second World War treaty to put as many military installations as it wants on the island. And secondly, you're honestly telling me that if the United States really wants the rare earths and wants the oil and so on, they couldn't do a deal with every one of the Greenlanders. There's not that many of them. I think it's fewer than 100,000.
56,000.
There you go. Exactly. It's
well,
not
most,
that many.
I think the inhabitants, I mean, most of those, I think, are Danes rather than Greenlanders.
Well, exactly. And you know, you're honestly telling me that $500 million, that's what, that's $1 million each, wouldn't, you know, secure some sort of treaty status, you know, perhaps a territory, perhaps a state of the United States if they really wanted to. So I think quite a lot of this is noise in that sense. I don't find it particularly helpful. It somewhat leaves me a bit cold when major world leaders are saying this could lead to the end of NATO, which only encourages Russia and China to push harder in these sort of areas. So, you know, I'm not sure it's particularly helpful to say that. But it's certainly true that the United States has many options other than stepping in, you know, militarily.
But why would they need to? If you say, look, they've got the right, we know they've already got those bases there. We know, okay, there's oil, there's mineral reserves. But, you know, so they don't need any more oil. America's got plenty of oil of its own. It's trying to get back the, you know, the oil reserves the oil that they were accessing through American firms that was seized by Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela. Is this about strategic importance? And is this about a threat from China and Russia? Because we've got, you know, these axes of evil. We know that's been an issue in Venezuela. That they're working with Maduro. Is this a concern about Greenland? Because we've heard a lot about how, you know, the strategic importance of Greenland for the Arctic, protecting that North Atlantic, those North Atlantic seas, and huge number of, you know, Russian and Chinese vessels in that area. Is that a genuine strategic defence concern for America?
Yes, and I think it's a perfectly reasonable one. I mean, if you look at the Chinese and Russian ships now using the Arctic, which of course used to be frozen all year round, but now has some element of summer passage. I wouldn't overstate it, but some element of summer passage. It certainly is an element, but that's why they could exercise the existing treaty that's been going for whatever it is, over 80 years now, and put as much as they want up there. You know, the Canadians are investing more in their over-the-horizon capability, and many other people are sort of looking at it in Norway and places like that in order to play their part. So I certainly think there's a strong argument that NATO needs to do more in the high north. I don't think there's much debate about that. And I think the United States is right to put pressure on us, on, you know, the Danes and others who maybe haven't quite, frankly, played the part that they should have done over recent years, to do more. But I'm not sure seizing territory really helps or hinders. I mean, American businesses can exploit those resources and get rich off what's there anyway, and American troops can be based up there anyway. So I think quite a lot of this is changing the debate in Washington.
Is it just sort of saber rattling? Is it all talk? Is it a message not to the people of Greenland or you know, the coalition of the willing in Paris right now? Is it actually a message to China and Russia, basically saying, and we've heard this a lot, you know, this national security strategy, that, you know, basically this is where we're in charge, don't mess with us?
So I think a large element of it is reasserting US hegemonic control over the Americas, north and south, and demonstrating that they are fully committed to defending their area, and in fact to having a sphere of influence in a way that you know, we haven't seen since the 1800s.
So should we be condemning that? Because we've got, you know, the Emily Thornberrys of the world. I'm sure you're a big fan as well. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, you know, Labour MP, you know, used to be, you know, dinner party companion of the Prime Minister's until she didn't get a job in his cabinet last year, but one. But you know, condemning this and all this talk about the rules-based international order and Keir Starmer not standing up to Donald Trump on this. Is she right or is he right?
Look, my problem with all of this is, frankly, if you're not willing to pay for the police, why do you think the judges are going to listen to you? I mean, it's a really strange thing where we have effectively lived under a US security umbrella almost for 20 or 30 years. I'd say only for 20 or 30 years, because before then we played our part. We paid 5%, we paid 4%, whatever it was. We paid a large element for our own defense as part of the Cold War. Exactly right. And, you know, we demonstrated our capability by things like the 1982 Falklands War, where we demonstrated that we were not only capable, but we were resolute. Well, you know, in the last year, what are the lessons that the President of the United States and the US people are going to draw from us? we're not even willing to argue in court over the Chagos Islands, let alone fight for them. We're not serious. We're not a serious country. So when you hear people saying, oh, well, you're breaking international law, hang on a minute. International law doesn't apply to Russia and China and Iran because they ignore it. Yep. It doesn't apply to Europe because it's too weak. So the only people it really applies to is the US. Well, funnily enough, they're grating at it, and they're turning around and they're saying, hang on a minute, if it's only there to constrain us, well, forget it.
Well,
but the reality is, law really matters. But if you think it matters, then you've got to police it. And if we're not willing to pay for it, we can't complain when others don't.
But the reality is, you can't police great powers like US, like China. I mean, we barely police Russia, it would appear, because people want to buy their gas more than they want to actually stop them from invading Ukraine. I mean, the reality is that the international rules-based order is a complete fiction, and it's actually been America being since 1990 the main superpower in the world, and therefore, and you say we're under their umbrella, and what they say goes, and that's the end of the matter.
Well, hang on, I'm going to push back a bit on that, Julia. It's not that you can't police it, it's not that you can police it in the normal way of sort of you can slap America on the wrist or something like that. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, if you're willing to share your burden, if you're willing to be a security provider of a scale or equivalence to the United States, now that doesn't mean quite to the same size, but if you're at least willing to stump up, so when something goes wrong, you're willing to do something about it, then you have a vote, you have a voice, you have a say in how the world changes. And it means that international organizations, NATO, various international courts, the UN, whatever, they are relevant because you have a relevant voice. If you're not even willing to put your hand in your pocket to pay for defense, well, you're not relevant. Yeah. So that's what I mean by policing. I mean being an equal part.
Are we the UK relevant anymore? Is the EU, is Europe relevant anymore? Given the
in defense terms, no. Yeah. Sorry, let's be absolutely clear. In defense terms, no, we're not. And you can see that by the fact that, 20 years ago, a US president would have made a quiet call to number 10. The CIA chief would have spoken to the head of MI6. The head of SOCOM would have phoned up the director of special forces. But as the prime minister told us on Saturday, or rather he told Laura Kuenssberg on Saturday, and we saw it on Sunday, he was waiting for the press conference.
I knew nothing.
Seriously, he was waiting for the press conference. But I'm with you. I was absolutely
he's the Prime Minister of Belgium. By that.
Sorry, I like Belgium, but this is ridiculous.
Yeah, he should have already had a briefing. His people should have known exactly. I thought it was quite extraordinary, but he didn't know. Well, this is it, because we've got this meeting, the Coalition of the Willing. The willing to do what, we're not quite sure, in Paris right now, hosted by Macron, who loves a meeting, loves hugging people, loves being filmed with Zelensky.
Julia,
What's going to come of that meeting?
But let me go back to you on this, because that is, I think, the real tell. You've seen over the last year and a bit, and the 4 years before there, President Trump turning up at meetings and leaving early, or in fact, sometimes not even turning up, and various US officials not turning up. And I think there's now a real divide between the bureaucratic states and the leader states. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The leader states do stuff. They closed the southern border. They sort out Iran's intervention in the Americas through the drug sales that go through Hezbollah and Venezuela into West Africa and so on, and into America. They do stuff. And then you have the bureaucratic states. They sit down, they have a meeting, they draft a press release, everyone's satisfied, they slap each other on the back, and nothing changes. Now, if you're not willing to make changes, guess what? People will eventually turn to more and more strident voices in the hope that they will actually do it. Now, they may do it or they may be incompetent, but people are looking for the change. And if those who are supposed to deliver the change only deliver another meeting, guess what? Turn somewhere else.
I'm just going to explain to people the story because it's absolutely blowing my mind. It's a staggering blunder by the police, a mix-up which saw police wrongly tell one family that their son, their teenage son, had died in a car crash, and another that theirs was badly injured in a coma in hospital, leaving relatives grieving one teenager for 3 weeks when he was alive in hospital the whole time. They're planning his funeral, and another family believing their son had miraculously survived a car crash, others died in this car crash, that actually their son was dead. This is involving 18-year-old Joshua Johnson and also 17-year-old Trevor Wynn. And they thought that apparently everyone thought that Joshua Johnson was under sedation in hospital, but he in fact had died. And they thought that Trevor Wynn had died and he's in fact alive. Parents, I mean, I can't even imagine what they're all going through. How on earth did this happen?
I've no real idea, Julia, to be honest. I mean, the most serious identification issue I dealt with was in the army when a helicopter exploded, and we knew the two men were in the helicopter, but of course we had to use dental records to check who was actually who, so the relatives know the person they're burying is tragically that individual. And this case is really strange in the sense it's taken about three or more weeks to suss out that it's the wrong person who they believe has died. So I can only imagine that the parents haven't gone to the hospital. As a parent, you would have thought, and it's come to the point where the police are saying they had to use forensics. So I imagine that was taking the fingerprints or something like that. But to not confirm identities and then give out a death message is just absolutely dreadful. You can only feel for the family who thought their son was alive, and I imagine the elation of the family who thought their son was dead. But this doesn't compensate for the family who thought their son was alive. It's
just extraordinary. By all accounts, they're really good friends, these lads, and sadly a third teenager in the car did die when their car left the road and hit a tree. But they look very alike, very similar, similar builds and the like. And we're assuming, we're talking about this poor teenager who's been in a coma in hospital for three weeks. We're talking about catastrophic injuries, presumably for both youngsters. We don't have the details, but I'm thinking burns, which would suggest, the parents would have been in there, not able to see their child's face and not realising. But it just defies belief that this was done. And given that if the injuries were so catastrophic for both the dead and the alive teenager, that they would just be extra careful to take some DNA to establish who was who. Or maybe they thought, well, this was the owner of the car and this was the kid driving, it must be him that's dead, or whichever way around it was. But it just seems to be so... just such scrappy, low-level police work not to just be 100% sure in this scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I've dealt with all sorts of deaths and been to post-mortems, and the identification of the person is the absolute critical thing. Yeah. And so and if you can't see the face, of course, you've got dental records, you've got fingerprints, you've got DNA. All these things are available to the police to use. And it's just and when you're investigating a death, it's a real responsibility that you're given as a police officer. It's almost an honour that you're trusted to deal with this. And for all the incompetence sometimes of the police with some crimes, the investigation of deaths is something, murders and traffic accidents is something that the police are usually very professional at. And this is just utterly amateurish. And it's the impact on real families, which is the tragedy here.
Well, indeed. And in this case, we know an 18-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. A 19-year-old was arrested on suspicion of perverted course of justice. And I say another teen did lose their life. We've been talking about road safety a lot today. Front page of the papers today with this government consultation on slashing the drink driving limit to under 1 pint, which they claim will improve road safety. Also, a 6-month wait for between your theory test and your practical test for youngsters. We know it's a big issue with youngsters on the road. And a lot of other countries have restrictions. We talked about that earlier in the show as well. What do you make as a police officer? And again, I've sat in coroner's court as a news reporter and have to see the aftermath. You've been there at the seat of these horrific collisions. What do you make of those changes the government wants to bring in?
I'm not sure on the drink driving. As a previous guest has said, people are going to drink drive. They'll be far more over the limit than a minor fraction. I think the big thing is young lads in cars. It's not having another young lad in that car with you who's egging you on. This is what seems to happen when you see
late at night.
Late at night, young lads. They've got some girls in the car. They're trying to impress them. The other young lads egging them on. It's about who can go with you in that vehicle, I think, in your first 12 months. I think that would make a real difference.
And other countries do have those rules, don't they, about the time you can, and whether you're allowed anyone else in the car. So if a youngster needs to use a car to get to college or to their job, they can do that, but they're just not going to be out joyriding with their mates.
It is true. And a real big problem, Julia, as well, and it's harder for the police to detect, is the use of drugs when driving.
Why is it so hard for them to detect? And why are they not dealing with it? Because everyone, again, I know some people go, oh, this is a big problem. Well, why are we not dealing with it then?
Well, the breath test is there. The breath tests have got better for alcohol. You used to have to take, the one at the roadside used to be sort of a sort of indication, and then you had to take them to the police station and do the drink drive breath test, the official one there. Now you can do that on the roadside. Testing for drugs is just harder. There's all manner of drugs that people could have taken. And I heard a caller yesterday saying, people are going to football matches. You can't get in the losing football matches because people are taking cocaine, and then they're driving home. Also, the other thing as well is the lack of officers on the ground.
Well, this is the key. Whatever the rule is, if no one, again, we have laws against shoplifting, but if no shoplifters are ever arrested or prosecuted, it doesn't stop you,
It's easy with speeding because the camera flashes, you're doing 35 and a 30, guilty. There's no way out of that. Yeah. But with drink driving, of course, you need officers who are on patrol, who look for erratic driving, who are stopping people, doing breath tests and the like, and that's the failing. You need officers on the ground to enforce things. So politicians will always bring in new rules. We'll ban a zombie knife. We'll ban. We'll make it 0.08 milligrams or whatever instead of 0.5. And the trouble is, though, you can do all these things, pass it in Parliament, and then there's nobody to enforce that, so it doesn't work. Absolutely. Well,
I mean, it's not a happy year for a lot of people who are worried about the cost of living, and it's interesting that the Prime Minister's first, whatever the 50,000 millionth reset it was this week, talking about the cost of living and how we're going to turn a corner, all change, and things are going to improve in 2026. But it certainly won't for drivers, fuel duty set to go up, and it certainly won't for pub owners, hospitality, people who want to go to their local pub, struggling to stay afloat with their business rates are going up. What do you think Keir Starmer doesn't get about the costs that are affecting real people and real businesses right now?
Yeah, absolutely. These challenges at home are huge. I've just got to say before that, I'll just say very, very quickly, your last caller who I had to sit through was an absolute disgrace, by the way.
Why?
Because a woman was just shot dead, and you rightly refuted her on that. I'm pleased to see that you did, but a woman was just shot dead and murdered by federal agents in the US. And did you hear the callousness in her voice because you disagreed with her politically? That's the tide that we're facing from America.
I think we're facing that on the left and the right in America, and I think we face that here as well. If you're on my side, I'll agree with you. If you're not on my side, I'll condemn you.
That's definitely a factor across the world. It is polarization. But I will say, these people who support Donald Trump in their mania will support him no matter what. She was talking about the decency of a woman who got shot and why she shouldn't be there.
But she shouldn't have been there.
Not done. Yeah, I don't care, Julia. She was shot dead.
Yeah, I don't want her shot, but she shouldn't have been there.
The statements and the language from Donald Trump. She was bothered about the rhetoric of the mayor. When you see the words that Donald Trump says about, Greenland, about his own population, about Somali people in Minnesota.
I mean, one could criticise both, and I would criticise both.
Well, we're not here to discuss it. I understand. Okay. I'll not take any more of your time. Right, I could not sit through it without saying something.
Okay, let's talk about the cost of living here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Keir Starmer's situation that he faces right now is obviously very difficult. But I think you're right. I don't think it's not so much that he doesn't get it. I mean, he must get it. He must understand on a human level how difficult it is for people. And of course, it's in his best interest to fix it. He'll want to, of course he will. I just don't think that he's equipped to do so because he's not thinking outside of the box. Keir Starmer is very much a status quo kind of person. You keep things going as they are. There's certain institutions you can't change. There's certain options that are off the table. Unfortunately, we don't live in those times anymore. We live in times where you have to take drastic measures to fix drastic problems.
But we're going to see, thousands more pubs going under because the business rates. At the same time today, the government is enacting legislation which is going to spend £3 billion of our hard-earned taxpayers' money to give people who don't work full-time, mum off and not working at all, more money because they've chosen to have more kids than they can afford to have under the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap. I mean, they don't get it. This is just about more handouts for people who don't do the right thing, taking money from people who do the right thing.
That's not my view on it. I mean, a strong welfare state's important.
Yeah, we should just throw money at anyone who makes all the wrong decisions and can't be asked to work properly.
Wrong decisions. Come on, Julia. It's not about right or wrong decisions here. It's about a government supporting its people. That's its duty.
Supporting its people.
Yeah, it's responsibility.
And the Labour's people are people who can't be bothered to work and have too many kids.
People. It's not about Labour's people. Any government should be doing the same. It shouldn't be up for contestation whether we support our welfare state, just the same as our NHS.
I support the welfare state. No. Well, I support healthcare, but I don't support the NHS. I support the welfare state as a safety net, not as a way of life for people who can't be bothered.
It's not. But this is the difficulty that we come up against time and time again, Julia, is that you think it is a way of life, but it's very much not. You cannot exist on that.
Well, they do. We constantly hear this, apart from the fact that millions of people do choose to do that.
Lots of people have to. They don't have a choice.
We could help the people who don't have a choice, the severely disabled people who are really in dire straits through illness.
The problem is you're deciding who is in that category.
Yes, I want to decide. Yes, okay. I want medics to decide. I don't think a 19-year-old who doesn't like getting up on a Monday morning is someone I should be supporting with my hard-earned taxes.
I don't know anyone like that, though, Julia.
I literally know kids like that.
I think we should put you. I think there should be a funded documentary to put you in the tribunals, Julia.
Oh my God, please!
No, listen, not so the power can go to your head because I know what you like. But I think it should be so that you can see the reality of it.
Yeah.
And it will soften your heart, and you'll be changed.
I don't think it will. I really don't think it will. I've yet to watch
with an ear.
I've yet to watch one of these documentaries which are supposed to make me bleeding hot. And I see some woman at the food bank talk about how difficult things are. I'm just like, nope. I just think you should go and get a proper job and start having kids.
I think you need to examine something, or you need a visit from 3 ghosts. But the time for that's passed because we've just had Christmas.
You know who I worry about? I worry about the people who are really struggling, who are doing jobs that they really don't enjoy, with a rotten boss, getting paid a pittance, who are struggling every single day to make ends meet and put food on the table, and who are being forced to pay. And they're being forced to pay for those people. No, the vast majority of people getting that 2-child benefit cap, getting that extra benefit, which is a few grand a year, 3.5 grand a year. It's not 20 quid a week. It's not the child benefit most people are thinking about. They don't either no parent is in work, or only one parent is in work and they're not working full time. I'm sorry, if both parents were working full time, perhaps stopping having babies, they would be a lot better off. And I don't see why I should be funding their poor decision making.
But at the same time, you're frustrated with declining birth rates, and you're frustrated with all of that, aren't you? So if you want to make it more difficult for people to have children,
I don't want to make it more difficult for people to have children. I think that the people who are law-abiding, hard-working taxpayers, I'm pretty sure that those people would have more kids if they didn't have to pay such high taxes to fund the other families who are
people claiming child benefit are not law-abiding people. Let's be clear about that. These are people who are in all sorts of myriad of circumstances, and it's just as it would be naive of me to say every one of them is fine and crystal clear and unscrupulous and all the rest of it would be wrong. It's wrong for you to say that they're all a problem.
No, okay. No, well, not all a problem, but there are people I'd want to help. We could help the people who need help far more if we weren't helping pretty much anyone who wants it. Let me ask you just finally about Labour setting to hike fuel duty from September. Keir Starmer under pressure for yet another. I mean, every single policy he lays out, there's more pressure for a U-turn. Do you think he will U-turn?
I think he'll probably have to in the end. What frustrates me time and time again, and I end up finding myself siding with Conservatives on this more than people on my own side, which is, it's horrible, Julia, to be honest with you. But, the frustration is the way that we talk about cars in this country, and the way that we still kind of criticise people who have cars or drive vans as if it's like a choice, right? Like I grew up in rural Northumberland, in a single-parent household with not much money at all. We had a car. We had to. My mum went from, scrap car to scrap car to scrap car. We just had to because you could not get anywhere because there's no bus routes.
Absolutely. And this is what Nigel Farage said about the new drink drive laws, basically saying this is dreamt up by Islington cycling elite because they simply don't understand how vital they are. I'm going to have to leave it there. James Mathewson, former Labour Party spokesman and commentator, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Philip Ingram, do you want to come back in on any of that?
Yeah, well, I know a large number of people from all different social economic backgrounds, and I know
I've done military intelligence on all of them.
Well, no, I know people who are genuinely deserving of welfare support,
yes,
and I would give them my last penny myself if I felt they needed it. But I know even more people who are ripping the system apart.
Yep.
And playing the system.
And the people in between who kind of just need to be nudged to, that's not an option, mate. Go to work.
But a lot are choosing not to work, or a lot are choosing not to do additional hours at work because they're getting benefits. If they didn't get the benefits, the additional hours at work are there and available for them.
Absolutely.
It's just wrong.